In 2022, we take a new part of the Star Wars story with Andor. Its first season is well beloved by tons of people. Created by Tony Gilroy, starring Diego Luna, Stellan Skarsgard, as well as Kyle Soller, this show is about Cassian Andor. And during a time when the Empire is at its highest, most dangerous, a dark point in the universe of Star Wars, Cassian Andor becomes who he is destined to be, a rebel hero. And we see that progression through 12 episodes of this season. So we're going to take a look at this show, and if you, as a Christian, should watch it right now. Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm your host Tim, and we exist to help Christians live in the world, not of the world, by utilizing our convictions in the movies and shows we watch. Andor is rated TV-14 for some action, violence, brief language. So we're going to go over any convictions you might have that may prevent you from watching this season of Andor, go any theological themes that might be present in this series, and wrap it up with a personal review from yours truly. Without further ado, let's head in to the Christian Conviction Meter. And if this is your first time here, the Christian Conviction Meter is a series of 5 convictions that may prevent or distract you from your relationship with Jesus. That is not what we want. Jesus should be number 1 in our lives, so we don't want to distract or hinder or prevent you from following Jesus to the full extent you can. That's why we have this. So we're going to dive into violence and gore, lust, substances, profanity, and intense/horror scenes that may be present within the first season of Andor. With violence and gore, this show is a little more gritty and kind of darker compared to what we've seen with a lot of other Star Wars projects. And so there are definitely some death scenes that are contained within this show, namely the use of dead bodies as well. On top of that, there is plenty of classic Star Wars gunfights that are present within the show, as well as, of course, some hand-to-hand combat, although it's not as technical as some other films or other shows, but there is these things that are here. There isn't a ton of blood contained within the show. There's minimal parts where blood is present, usually from different scars or just bruising, things of that sort that happen due to events that take place through the series. This is talking about tyranny and talking about rebelling against the Empire, right? So there are going to be action, there is going to be violence that take place in the show. I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5 just to be on the safe side here. With this show, it's a little bit more intense in this regard and a little more, I guess the best way to put is visceral compared to, say, the Star Wars movies. Our next category is lust, and in the first episode of the series of this season in particular, we do see Cassian Andor enter into a brothel. Nothing is shown here and nothing explicitly sexual is contained within the show, especially at this point. He's more trying to look for something. He's on a mission, and his mission has nothing to do with what a brothel is. So that is something to keep in mind. On top of that, there is a scene a bit later in the season where there is a woman lying in bed. All we see is just a blanket covering her. We aren't sure what exactly she is or isn't wearing, so that is something to keep in mind. And then, of course, lastly, there is also a scene where there are guys all together in prison in a big kind of shower prison thing. I guess that's the best way to describe it. But again, these are things that are contained within the show, but there is no nudity. There is nothing sexual specifically about this show in particular. I'm going to give this a 1 out of 5 just to be on the safe side for this particular conviction area. Our next category, substances, and for the most part, most of what we see in this show is going to be more kind of alcoholic beverages. I can't pinpoint exactly what it is because this is sci-fi fantasy, so they're all kind of made up drinks, but for the most part, it would be primarily thought of as alcoholic beverages. And of course, there is also a scene where a person does take a pill to say, hey, I'm going to be working later, as kind of a boost of some sort. But you can't really tell exactly what the beverages are, can't tell what the pill is specifically. To be on the safe side here, I'm going to give this a 2 out of 5 just because of the combination of drinks and the pill. It might be a little high on this category, but I'd rather be on the safe side for this one in particular, so a 2 out of 5 here. Our next category, profanity, and this is pretty mild, although I would say a little bit more than what we see with either other Star Wars shows or the Star Wars movies. There is the use of hell, which has been used in the Star Wars universe before. The A word's used, the BA word's used, the DA word is used, and for the first time ever in the Star Wars universe, the SH word is used. It's never been said up until this season in particular. But other than that, I mean, they're throughout the series, but they're not used as heavy or as prevalent as some other shows that we've talked about here on the channel, or just, you know, what you would come to expect from a TV-14 kind of show. Again, mild uses, but a little bit more compared to the Star Wars movies. So we're going to give this a 2 out of 5 on this category in particular. Moving on to our last category, intense and horror sequencing. There is no horror elements contained within this series because this is not a horror show. However, there are more gritty and intense, kind of darker stuff compared to any other Star Wars project. That is, once again, something to keep in mind. In particular here, because of the gritty nature of this show, like I mentioned up at Violence and Gore, there are a few dead bodies contained within the show. At the same time too, later in the season, there is a torture scene of one of our characters. While we don't explicitly see what type of torture is going on, there's like a helmet sort of thing that's like placed upon this character, and she has to listen to something. We don't know what that is. Thankfully, there is no audio specifically given to us to let us in on what she's experiencing. But the blood-curdling screaming that does take place lets us know that it is something not good and something very stressful and scary. So that is something to keep in mind. On top of that, I do want to be sensitive here on this next part. There is a few episodes that take place in prison. And one of those parts of that is someone does commit and takes their own life. They decide to go through with that by electrocuting themselves on the floor that is wired with electricity. That is something to keep in mind. It is a brief sequence, but it still is a part of this show. At the same time too, there are plenty of explosions, and there even is a mentioning of taking out of 30 rebels, kind of a massacre, so to speak. We don't see that on screen, but it is talked about through a few episodes, both in the planning of this as well as the execution of that plan. So these things are contained within the show. Again, it is pretty gritty compared to what we have seen with other Star Wars projects, so I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5 here as well. And yeah, there's a decent amount of intense sequences contained within this series. So overall, on the Christian conviction meter, it is a 11 out of 25. It's about halfway through, kind of what we have come to expect with other PG-13 projects, TV-14 projects, all that sort of stuff. It is going to be a bit more than some of our other Star Wars projects, which I promise we will get to reviewing the Star Wars movies here, hopefully before the next Star Wars movie comes out. But again, these are things to note about this show in particular. If any of these convictions or any of these areas made you kind of go, ugh, I don't know about that, go ahead and just take a pause. Don't worry about watching this show. Ultimately, we want you to follow the Jesus to the best of your abilities here on earth. So in order to do that, make sure you don't compromise those convictions. Without further ado, let's talk about some theological themes that are present within Andor Season 1. And overall, there really isn't much here in terms of theological themes. I didn't find anything in watching all 12 episodes of this season to be anything of a hint or allegory to Christianity, Jesus, the Bible, the church. None of that whatsoever is really contained within the show. There is, of course, the greater Star Wars argument and Star Wars story arc of good versus evil, right? And rebelling against the evil and stuff like that. And we'll probably talk about that once we get to the actual movies. But for this show in particular, there really isn't anything that really stuck out to me in particular when it comes to any theological themes. With that wrapped up, let's wrap up this time with a personal review. What are my thoughts on season 1 of Andor? Overall, this show is really solid and very enjoyable. I will admit it does start off quite slow, but as the series progresses, as it continues forward, it all culminates together very, very nicely, and it's done very well. Diego Luna, who of course played Andor back in Rogue One, does a fantastic job returning to this character, adding new layers and new elements to bring this character to life in a way that I think is done just at a very good level. At the same time too, Stellan Skarsgard, who's an actor that I've enjoyed for most of my life, he did a fantastic job joining in as Luthen. He is now part of the Star Wars universe. I think he just fits that so well here. One thing I do appreciate about this show is kind of the dark and gritty tone. We don't see that a lot in Star Wars. I think the last time we really kind of got this would be the latter seasons of the Clone Wars, but even that was limited in its extent of showing just the grittiness, and we even got that a bit in Rebels too. But the way that they capture living under the Empire, the layers that the Empire goes to, the lengths the Empire goes to try to do what they feel must be done, right? It's just done so well, and it just adds kind of that sort of emotional part for us as the audience in seeing a new way, seeing the Empire through a different lens, and a lens that shows us kind of their brutality. And I think that is done at a very good spot and also a very good pace within this entire show. We get new layers of just the Empire, specifically with the ISB being a heavy part of the show. On top of that, there probably are a few things I think that could be trimmed down here. As much as this is Andor's show, it is, kind of setting up some of the other parts of the Rebels. I mean, you get a little bit of some characters we've seen throughout. If you've seen the trailers, Mon Mothma's very much a part of this series. We get to see a little bit of her, and I do love the character arc that she has in this show. There are a few characters we do get introduced to, both namely for the Empire, but also for the rebellion, I guess you could say, or those who are on Cassian's home world here. One of those characters I think we spent a little too much time with is Cyril. He's kind of like this disgraced officer that was like in charge of keeping security and stuff. I think we spent just a bit too much time with him, just because I think the arc they tried to give him just wasn't as fulfilling. He will be a part of, I think, this next season, so I'm curious to see what way they take his character. But again, I don't know, I just felt like we could have spent some of that time towards a few other pieces, a few other layers, but that is probably just a nitpick on my part. But even with that, Andor has some really high highs, that which includes One Way Out, which is arguably easily the best episode of this season, and honestly one of my favorite episodes of television. At the same time too, there's no lightsabers, there's no force, there's none of that which you would say are your more Star Wars-y elements, but I don't think it really needs it. It keeps the tone kind of grounded, and it very much feels like a build-up to what is going to take place in season 2 and ultimately Rogue One, and ultimately going forward for the original trilogy of the Star Wars saga. So overall, this is just a really solid show. It's dark and gritty, yes, but overall it is just so well done. It's very well written, and overall is a fantastic, a great show, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Overall, I'm going to give it an 8.6 out of 10. For these type of shows that I do reviews on, I calculate the total by adding all the scores up together of each episode, dividing it by the number of episodes to give us the median score, which is an 8.6 out of 10. So it's an 11 out of 25 on the conviction meter, and it is a 8.6 out of 10 on our review time. Those are my thoughts, so let me know yours down in the comments below. What are your thoughts on Andor? Let's chat all about this first season in the comments. Season 2 is rapidly approaching, kicking off with its 3-episode premiere on Disney Plus April 22nd, so keep an eye out for that. The IMDB parent guide is in the description below. And while you're down there, please give us a like and subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. It just sends us out into the algorithm, allows us to reach more Christians so they can utilize their convictions to follow Jesus better in the movies and shows they watch. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend time with us here. We truly appreciate it, and we will see you all very soon. But before you go, there are a few video recommendations here for you to check out. YouTube is recommending. Hope they did a good job. See you all over there.